Alright, this book seems to be a favourite amongst murderers at number 10. We have The Catcher in the Rye, which you shouldn't read unless you want to go mad. Oddly, The Catcher in the Rye seemed to inspire two very high-profile shootings, the murder of John Lennon and the attempted murder of Ronald Reagan. John Lennon was shot dead on the 8th of December 1980 by Mark David Chapman. The lone gunman from Texas was found to be obsessed with J.D. Salinger's novel and was found calmly reading it on a curb nearby his attack on Lennon prior to his arrest. It seems he wrote his statement inside the novel too. He felt like if he carried out the assassination, he would become Holden Caulfield, the protagonist of the novel. 5 months later, on March the 30th, 1981, John Hinckley carried out an assassination attempt on the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. It seems that Hinckley's motivation was a weird attempt to win over actress Jodie Foster, whom he had an obsession with. When Hinckley was caught, he was found with a copy of none other than The Catcher in the Rye. Coming in at number 9, we have The Orphan's Story. This story was written by a Malaga monk between 1608 and 1615. Now it's about an orphan from Granada who travelled to the Spanish Empire to seek his fortune. For some reason, the transcript never made it to print, and everyone that seemed to be associated with it died. The manuscript was lost for centuries, some say hidden away because of the curse. Then a string of publishing attempts failed and people just started dying. The book, however, is to be finally published. Belinda Palacios, a Peruvian editor, said that she was regularly warned off the project because of the string of untimely deaths associated with the book. She said it's taken a while because the people who have worked on it died from one strange disease or in car accidents. I think that this is one book that I would steer clear of. Okay, this book may kill you, but not because of demons or devils, but because of cancer. Wait, a book that gives you cancer? Awful. That's right, coming in at number 8, we have Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. When Bradbury's 1953 book about a dystopian future came out, the marketing team had a wise idea. The book is about a group of so-called firemen who burn down the homes and belongings of people who read illegal, non-state approved books. Wouldn't it be cool for the limited edition books to be fireproof? It sure would. The only issue was that people didn't know what was what in the 1950s, and the book was bound with asbestos. You know, the substance that gives you lung cancer. Not great. So while the book in itself is a bit of a scary read, the reality of the book is even scarier. Coming in at number 7, we have the Voynich manuscript. Who knows what is happening and what is contained within the text of the Voynich manuscript? The text is regularly alluded to as the world's most mysterious book. Written in the early 15th century, what the 240-page cryptic text actually says is still a mystery, and it has baffled humans for 600 years. It appears to be written in an unknown language and contains strange illustrations and diagrams. The book has been passed down from emperors and important members of society, eventually falling into the hands of a Polish book dealer. A 2006 book by Nicholas Pelling claims that the text is cursed. Others think that it was secretly dropped on Earth by aliens. There are hopes that Canadian computer scientists may have invented a machine that will be able to decode the enigmatic text. Who knows what we'll discover? Almost as intriguing as what the text said is who or what wrote it. We still don't know. Coming into number 6, we have the Codex Gigas. The Codex is a hefty old chap weighing 165 pounds, so more than me. The text heralds from the 12th century and is referred to as the Devil's Bible. Why? Well, according to the legends, the monk who wrote the text had broken his vow and was due to be walled to death. So what actually happens when somebody's walled to death? Well, it's a bit like being buried alive, but instead you're bricked up in a wall, like in a really small space until you run out of air and die in the wall. Really not ideal. In fact, I feel like it happens in an episode of Jonathan Creek, so if anyone watches that, shout out to you. Anyway, the night before his death, he wanted to create a book on all human knowledge, but he realized that, you know what, that's actually not a long time to write a book. He summoned Lucifer and asked him to finish it for him in exchange for his already damned soul. Apparently this is why there's a picture of the devil in the manuscript. But it's not just any picture, it's a 19-inch tall picture. So, a text written by the devil, surely no good can come from reading it. Coming into number 5, we have the Book of Soiga. The Book of Soiga is an an early 16th century treatise on demonology written in Latin. There are only 2 copies of the book in the world, and one was possessed by Elizabethan scholar John Dee, who spent his life trying to interpret the text. Basically, the text is filled with spells and rituals, and it's kinda creepy. He had a pretty good grasp of what was happening, except for the final 36 pages, which he simply couldn't decipher. He and his trusted friend Edward Kelly summoned the spirit Uriel to tell them the meaning of the last pages. Now, the legend says that Uriel possessed Kelly and spoke through him. He claimed that the book came into existence when Adam entered paradise, and that it could only be properly interpreted by Archangel Michael himself. He also said that whoever does decipher the meaning of the final 36 pages will be destined to die 2.5 years after they do so. Coming into number 4, we have the prophecies of Nostradamus. Did Nostradamus curse us, or were his texts a warning? The 16th century French physician wrote a collection of 942 poetic prophecies, many of which have come true. A lot of people think that these quatrains were, like his grave, cursed. If he had the power to curse his grave, why wouldn't his poetry be cursed? Nostradamus famously prophesied the Great Fire of London, the death of King Henry II, the French Revolution, vaccination, the rise of Hitler, the atomic bombs, 9/11 and more. We just don't know what they are yet. Reading these texts may not curse you, but then again, knowledge of a terrible event without the ability to change the outcome must be a great curse indeed. Coming into number 3, we have the Great Omar. The Francis Sangorski special edition of the Great Omar is for sure cursed. Not only was the original one of the most blinging books around, it seemed to be on the receiving end of some seriously bad juju. Emblazoned with gold leaf, gemstones, and peacock feathers, the original copy of the Great Omar sank on board the Titanic and is lost somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean. Sangorski then died just 6 weeks later as he drowned in an accident in the English Channel. A second copy was made by Stanley Bray, recreating the original. Now, that copy was destroyed in the London Blitz. A third copy was then painstakingly recreated by Bray once again, who died just 5 years later. When asked about the book's tragic history, Bray said, "I'm not in the least bit superstitious, even though they do say that the peacock is a symbol of disaster, I'll say." Now, the only surviving copy now lays in the British Library. Visit, if you dare. This isn't a book up next, but it is a poem which really is just kind of a short lyrical book. Now, I'm not sure you're ready for this, but people who read this poem are doomed to die. In at number 2, we have Tamino's Hell. I know that all men must die and all of that, but Tamino's Hell is said to speed the process way up. The poem is a 1919 Japanese work of literature that is cursed, 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 and cursed again. It's supposed to cause death and tragedy if you read it aloud, so just don't do it. The poem tells the story of a young boy's damnation, his sickness as he vomits blood, and travels to the blackest of hells. Lovely jubbly. It isn't just Japanese readers who need to be a bit worried. The poem has been translated into English. Now, reading the poem is fine, feel free, even though it is kind of gross. What you don't want to do though is read it aloud in any language, unless, well, just actually don't do it. Finally, at number 1, we have one of the most cursed and spooky books in the entire history of print. We have the Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is often referred to as the Gospel of Satan or the Red Dragon text, and it is a book of spells believed to possess insane powers, but beyond that, it's said to be one of the most intense and potent occult books in existence. Written in the 16th century, the incantation book tells the reader how to summon the dead, and also how to summon powerful demons. Deeper sections of the book allegedly tell the reader how to do a deal with the devil. The book was said to be written by a man who was possessed by Satan. Now, the original text is so dangerous that it is allegedly held in storage by the Vatican's secret archives. The book is so mysterious and famous that it is frequently referenced in pop culture.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Codex Gigas. This book is said to give the reader the ability to harness evil and negative energy, and is also often referred to as the Devil's Bible. The book was first discovered in 1648 and is massive at 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and 8.7 inches thick. And here's what's weird. It weighs 165 pounds. It is said that this book was actually written by a monk, but this monk had broken his spiritual vows. He was of course punished, but in a pretty extreme way, which was to be sealed behind a wall and then left there to die. Right before his passing, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish the book, which is when he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. If I knew you could do that, I would have summoned Lucifer to finish all of my book reports in school. I guess I probably wouldn't have been cool with the whole whole like selling your soul thing though. It is said that this book is filled with dark rituals, instructions on how to perform exorcisms, as well as a bunch of creepy drawings of the devil and other demons. Right now it is said that this book has 310 pages, but that it once used to be 320. The 10 pages that were ripped out were said to contain instructions on how someone could summon the devil, so hopefully whoever has those 10 pages destroyed them right away. In our number 9 spot today we have the Untitled Grimoires. A witch's spell book should never be messed with, but I feel like that should be obvious, but I'll put that out there because apparently it isn't. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spell books that were sold online for $1,400 in 2013. The books were written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca who was the leader of a coven, and they detailed things like spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. So witch stuff. This is all fine and well unless you're sitting there thinking about how you don't believe. If you are a non-believer, it is best to stay as far away as possible from these books. The seller of the books warns that any non-believers who mess with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse, and on the first page, the Wiccan herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It reads, quote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." It's a pretty sound warning, and one I probably wouldn't roll the dice on, you know, just to be safe. In our number 8 spot today we have the Picatrix. This is a grimoire that is said to contain a large amount of magic that is presumed to be from the 11th century. This text has long been considered pretty obscene because of the graphic content that exists within the book. The pages contain some scholarly work with philosophy, astrology, and even some medieval science, which is actually pretty cool. But then there are things like recipes for concoctions that involve mixing human and animal blood, brains, urine, and other bodily fluid in with opium or other kind of dangerous substances. While some of what this book contains is definitely historically interesting, I think it's probably best to stay away from the magic and spells that lurk within. In our number 7 spot today we have The Grand Omar. This novel is an 11th century collection of poetry that was written by Omar Khayyam, but it's not what's inside of this book that holds the curse. In 1912, a bookbinder is said to have given this book lavish embellishments. There was silver, mahogany, ivory, leather, and over 1,050 jewels including ruby, garnet, topaz, turquoise, and gold. He took such care with this book that it actually took him 2 years to finish, and in 1912 is when he finished. Once finished, there was some trouble selling it. I mean, the book was extremely expensive now. The binder decided to ship it from the UK to the US for a chance to have an easier time selling it, but then there was a mix-up at customs and the book was shipped back to London. From here it is said that the book finally sold, but it was only for half the original price. The bookbinder once again had to ship the book overseas, but this time, guess which ocean liner the book ended up on? The ill-fated Titanic, of course. It is said that this original copy was never retrieved from the wreckage, but when the book was recreated, more strange things began to happen surrounding it. During World War II, it was said to be placed in a vault in London, but it ended up being ruined in a blitz. The vault itself was fine, but somehow the book inside, aside from the jewels, was completely turned to ash. In our number 6 spot today we have The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. This book was of course created by Abramelin, who is indeed a mage, and he created it as a gift for his son. In the early 1900s this book was translated into English, and that is when the rumors of the book being cursed began to spread. I mean, this book contained spells, but it also contained curses, so I feel like that rumor likely makes a lot of sense. It is said that this rumor has to do with Abramelin's belief that everyone has their own personal demon. I'm just hoping that mine is like cool and nice. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explained either bad luck or hauntings from the spirit world are what await for those who dare to read it. In our number 5 spot today we have The Grand Grimoire. This book is often referred to as the book with incredible power and has been called one of the darkest books in the world. While the author of this book is still unknown, the contents of it are things like black magic and dark spooky secrets. It is believed that the book was written sometime around 1521 and it is split into 2 books. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get a demon to do your bidding. The second book is split into 2 parts and it details how to make a pact with a demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means it is significantly riskier than the instructions in the first book. Apparently in the book it even details how someone can call upon Lucifer or the devil, so I guess who needs those 10 missing pages in the Codex Gigas. Just go out and get the Grand Grimoire and you're right back in the devil summoning game. The book describes a few different demons, and it also gives spells that one can do for things like winning the lottery. There's love spells, becoming invisible, you know, the things that people want. While those spells certainly sound nice, magic like that always comes at a cost. People fear the Grand Grimoire because they worry that if anyone reads it fully, then the devil will enslave their soul. No thank you. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Book of Soiga. Anything that is referred to as the Book of Death is definitely one I'll most likely spend my time trying to stay away from. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that is the least inviting thing I've ever heard in my life. If you don't agree with me on that sentiment, however, the tough thing with this one is that nobody knows exactly what language it is written in. The beginning part of the book definitely contains some spells and incantations, but the ending of the book is really where the mystery lies, and trying to decipher it is no easy feat. It is said that a scholar called John Dee once attempted to decode the secret book, and it was so difficult that he needed to call on the angel Uriel for help. Even the angel didn't have the answers and instructed John to call on the archangel Michael, who would be the only one who was able to interpret the text. Here's where the mystery gets more mysterious though. After John Dee passed away in 1608, the book basically just vanished, and no one knew where it went. But then, like magic, it just reappears in the 19th century. Despite this extremely interesting story and how it kind of draws you in like you wish you could crack the code that the book holds, it's best to stay away from it because it is said whoever is able to decipher the ending of the book will inevitably die 2.5 years later. So, is it really worth it? It's like a prequel to The Ring. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Munich Manual. Also referred to as the Necromancer's Manual, this grimoire comes to us from the 15th century and is a text that is largely focused on demonology and necromancy. A lot of grimoires have both good and dark magic, but this is one that focuses solely on the dark black magic. There are 3 different sections to this one. The first section deals with illusionist magic and spells that trick people into seeing things that aren't there. The next is psychological magic, which is meant to use emotions, politics, and things like that in order to gain power over another individual, and if those 2 weren't scary enough, the third is divinatory spells, which are meant to allow the reader to see into the past, present, or future. One of the most well-known parts of this book is the part that includes instructions on how to make the Mirror of Lilith, which is for the purpose of the divination we just talked about. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon. This is a grimoire that is said to be cursed. It is said to contain spells that are used for summoning over 72 different demons, and just to add a little air of mystery, no one is exactly sure who wrote it. This is because the book is made up of a few different texts that have been compiled from somewhere around the 17th century. This book is said to be so cursed that even having a copy of it will cause the owner to either experience constant bad luck or have the worst luck of all with passing away. People have shared their terrifying stories with the book, and they include the book's pages turning on their own, and another person shared that the book violently threw itself across the room at them. How terrifying would that be? While we aren't sure who wrote it, there have been rumors or stories that suggest it might have been King Solomon. It is said that perhaps he wrote it for his son and then asked him to bury it with him in his grave. When being prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and this is when they were visited by an angel who told them to hide the book from the unworthy. They then placed a spell on the book which was meant to keep it from getting into the wrong hands, and that is said to be how the book got its curse. In our number 1 spot today, we have The Orphan's Story. This is a book that was originally written in the 1600s, but it didn't end up getting published until 2018. The Orphan's Story is about a 14-year-old Spanish boy who heads to the Americas. It's supposed to be like a classic coming-of-age feel-good story, but it is not exactly, and that is exactly the reason why it took so long for it to be published. The curse in this book doesn't come from the story itself, however. There is something dark lurking in those pages. The book's publisher, Belinda Palacios, who worked on the book for 2 years, explained that throughout the years she was often warned of the cursed book and how every publisher who had tried to work on it before ended up passing away in a mysterious way before they were able to finish the book. When Belinda looked into this, it turned out to be true. Her research showed that those who tried to edit the book before either found themselves in horrible accidents or with strange illnesses. Luckily, Belinda somehow made it through the process unscathed, so let's hope that maybe the curse has been lifted. Either way, I don't think I'm gonna read this one. I don't know. You know, it's up to you though. If you want to, go ahead and let us all know.
Number 10. The Codex Gigas. We'll kick this list off on a promising start. This codex is believed to give the reader the ability to harness evil and negative energy. Nice, we love that. The book is commonly referred to as the Devil's Bible, which in my opinion has a better ring to it. First discovered in 1648, the codex itself is massive. It's 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and 9 inches thick. Just like Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Thing is just stacked. So thick. It weighs 165 pounds, so you can't just, put it in your backpack and go about your day. It's not going anywhere. It's said that this book was actually written by a monk, but this monk had broken his spiritual vows. And by doing so, he was of course punished. He was sealed behind a wall and then left there forever. Horrible way to go nonetheless, but right before his untimely departure, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish said book. So he called for backup. He called upon Lucifer. Yeah, that's a big yikes, we don't do that there. So afterwards, the book became immensely cursed, and it's now said that the book is filled with dark rituals, and even instructions on how to perform exorcisms, plus, a few creepy drawings of the devil and other demons. We love that. It doubles down as a coloring book. Nice. Hope you have lots of red. Right now, it's said the book has 310 pages, but it once used to have 320. Yeah, those 10 pages that were ripped out were said to contain instructions on how someone could summon the devil. So whoever has those 10 pages, hope you didn't lose them. Good game. Burn those immediately, please. Number 9, The Grand Grimoire. Again, I'll admit this one's a catchier title. In a world where we can figure out how to do anything online, and I mean anything, even fixing a sink with ramen, God forbid you need to do that, there you go. While the author of this book is still unknown, the contents of it are of course filled with black magic, dark spells, secrets of the underworld, all that horrible stuff. It's believed that the book was written sometime around 1521 and it's now split into 2 books. Oh, wow, even back in the 1500s we had cliffhangers. Awesome, no spoilers. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get the demon to do your bidding. The second book is split into 2 parts, and it contains details on how to make a pact with the demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means that it's, significantly riskier than the instructions in the first book. It's like, here's how to make a car, and now here's how to summon a car. You know what I mean? It's a little fishier in this one. The book describes a few different demons, and it also gives spells that one can do, not haunting things, but nicer, I guess, like winning the lottery, love spells, becoming invisible, superpowers, I guess, both good and evil. While those spells certainly sound nicer, magic like that always comes at a cost, right? We've seen Hocus Pocus. We've seen WandaVision, right? We've seen all the bad stuff, bad examples with witches. We can't have what we want all the time, okay? Leave the Grand Grimoire at your local library. Number 8, The Book of Soiga, aka the Book of Death. Okay, this one sounds promising already. Nobody knows what language it's written in, so right off the bat it's haunting. But it appears the first part of the book details different spells and incantations of some sort. And then the ending gets fishy. That's when many of our questions come into play here. All the letters in this final part are written in separate boxes, and despite people trying their absolute best, it's impossible to decipher. Yeah, not even Tom Hanks can do it, and he was in the Da Vinci Code, so. An old scholar named John Dee attempted to decode the book, and he apparently called upon an angel named Uriel for help. The angel explained to him then that only the archangel Michael is able to interpret said text, so that's the mystery the whole time. It's only for angel eyes, my friend. Apparently after John Dee passed away, this book mysteriously just vanished. It was never to be seen again after 1608 until the 19th century. That's when it magically reappeared again. Somehow. We don't know how, but it's just, there it is again. Where it went for so long, we have no idea. But if you lay your eyes on this book, well, you'll die around 3 years later, so moving on. Number 7, The Orphan Story. Getting your books published is always the hardest part, right? At least that's what the internet says. I've never written a book. Not yet. In this case, it's next to impossible. The Orphan Story was originally written in the early 1600s, but it didn't end up getting published until as recent as 2018. Quite the delay if you ask me. Now the tale itself, in its pages, it's a classic coming-of-age tale. A boy travels across the world, tries some new cheese or spaghetti. It's nice. Certainly nicer than the Devil's Codex, right? But the real-life history surrounding the publication process is what's cursed here. The book's 2018 publisher, Belinda Palacios, who worked on the book for 2 years, she explained that throughout those 2 years, she was often warned of the cursed book, and how every publisher who had tried to work on it before in the past ended up dying in a tragic way, shape, or form. Some sort of Final Destination type accident, right? Before they could finish publishing the book. So when Belinda looked into this, it turned out it was all true. Her research showed that those who had tried to edit the book before her either found themselves in horrible accidents or with a strange illness, one of the two. Now luckily Belinda made it through the process unscathed, so let's hope that maybe the curse has been lifted. Number 6, Untitled. The best tracks on rap albums are always the ones that are titled Untitled, you know what I mean? Kendrick's entire album, I'm like, you get the idea. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spell books that were sold online for $14,000. This was back in 2013. Also, pretty good price, may I add, for what's about to come. The books were written a long time ago by a high priestess, the leader of a coven, and they included spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. All the good stuff. 30 pages or less, here we go. The seller of the books warned that any non-believer who messes with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse. And on the first page of the book, the priestess herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It literally says, quote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." Yeah, the craft, we love that. So if you love buying old books for thousands of dollars, maybe avoid the Untitled Grimoires. Yeah, go with something a bit more, titled. A more jazzy grimoire, I don't know. I'm gonna go get a grimoire after work. I'm gonna go try one out. A nice 700-pound book made of dust. Number 5, The Book of Black Magic and Pacts. This one has an author that isn't a demon, which is nice. How fun is that? Off to a better start. The Book of Black Magic and Pacts was written by A.E. Waite. It covers lore, magic, cult history, and ceremonies. This book has been referred to as one of the greatest overviews of occultism, and it includes a large number of magical spells from a large number of sources. The book is also said to contain rituals of black magic. This is like, don't touch this kind of stuff, right? How many X-Men comics do we need? Stop reading these books. The author of this book, A.E. Waite, apparently he was a British poet as well. Nice, we love that. I love a good haiku, especially when it's about cults. Number 4, The Picatrix. This is a grimoire, of course, that is said to contain a large amount of magic that is presumed to be from the 11th century. We're not exactly sure. The pages contain some philosophy, astrology, and even some medieval science, which at first sounds cool, but these sciences are really just recipes for concoctions that involve mixing human and animal DNA. Like mixing urine and opium. Stuff like that where nobody should be really reading or trying any of it. The results were promised to be magical, but I'm far from convinced. This is really gross. This one definitely isn't the darkest or the spookiest on the list, which is a nice little refresher as we get to our grimoire ending here. And while some of the contents in this book is definitely historically interesting, I guess, I think it's probably best to just stay away from magic and spells in general. Number 3, Sorrows of Young Werther. We've got a lot of books on this list that are said to contain magic and spells and incantations. That's a fun word that I've said about 1,100 times already. This one here is a little different from the others on this list because it doesn't have any of those spells in it. No, this is a book that came out in 1774 and it's said to have a large and negative impact on its readers since its release. So, apparently after this book came out, a huge wave of its readers ended up taking their own lives because of the strange and dark contents that were in the book. Young men would start to emulate the main character of the book by dressing like him and then acting like him before ultimately following his dark actions in the book as well. This actually led to the book being banned in some countries, which here I can agree with. Yeah, something's clearly off here. It's believed that even people who were in a healthy place mentally prior to reading the book would still be tempted to follow that dark path after reading it. Hence, cursed, right? Yeah, grab Game of Thrones, skip Sorrow of Young Werther, please. Also reach out if you have any dark thoughts. That's much easier than renting a demonic codex. Number 2, The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. A little wordy for a title, in my opinion, but here we go. When you're an expert in magic, you probably don't give the same sort of gifts that the non-magical folks do, right? You're like, hey, here's a Rubik's Cube, I guess? So it's no surprise that Abramelin gifted his son a book of spells and curses, right? Just some Doctor Strange stuff right there. The classic Malfoy method, 5 points to Slytherin, there we go. They're learning young. In the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and ever since then there have been rumors swirling that the book is cursed. I mean, its source material is literally curses, so yeah, that checks out. Rumor has it that the cursed nature of this book, in part, has to do with Abramelin's belief that everybody has their own personal demon. This book holds instructions on how to get your demons under control by, reaching out to the spirit world. Yeah, if you're trying to quit smoking, don't read Abramelin's magical book, stick to Nicorette. I think that's safer. I think it's safer. Unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book might just be too powerful to handle, my friend. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explained either bad luck or hauntings soon followed. But they quit smoking, so hey, who knows? And finally, number 1, the Munich Manual. Also referred to as the Necromancer's Manual, this grimoire comes to us from the 15th century and is a text that is largely focused on demonology and, of course, necromancy. A lot of grimoires have both good and dark magic, but this is one that focuses solely on the dark, horrible black magic aspect, as you could have guessed. There are 3 different sections to this one. The first section deals with illusionist magic and spells that trick people into seeing things that aren't there. Some kind of low-key magic, right? The next is psychological magic, which is meant to use emotions or politics and things like that in order to gain power over an individual. So Professor X, let's say. And the third section details instructions on how to make the Mirror of Lilith. Yeah, this mirror has you looking younger than ever. Once properly constructed, the user can then see into the past, present, or future. Just Professor X again. I took a look this morning and everybody who watched this video actually hit that thumbs up. It was wild, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was like, thank you Mirror of Lilith, this is beautiful. All those likes and thumbs up. All for most amazing. Awesome.
Starting us off at number 10 is The Exorcist. I would be doing an injustice if I didn't start with one of the scariest movies of all time. And why was it the scariest movie of all time? Because it was one of the scariest books of all time. Written by William Peter Blatty and published in 1971, the book takes place in Washington DC and follows demonically possessed 12-year-old Reagan McNeil, who is also the daughter of a very famous actress. The duo are in Georgetown whilst the mother is filming when Reagan becomes sick. Weird things start happening around the house, which her mother tries to find rational explanations for, and Reagan's condition intensifies and deteriorates. Nothing helps her until the mother gives in and turns to a priest for help. A pair of priests spend the whole book trying to exorcise the demon, and it was actually based off of a real case of possession William heard about in the 50s. I don't want to go into more detail and include spoilers because if you haven't read it, you definitely should. I feel like scary books scare you in a way that movies just can't. When I used to read them at home alone, I physically could not continue reading because I was scared. I was scared of reading. Like, that is a real fear, people. Coming in at number 9 is Blindness. Written by Jose Saramago and published in 1995, the book follows an unnamed city or country that's been afflicted with an unexplainable epidemic of blindness. And since most people there go blind, a social and economic breakdown soon follows. The plot involves a group of unnamed characters, and the book is written in really long sentences, and there are no speech marks around the dialogue, so you're also like, wait, who's speaking right now? The first half of the book takes place in a dirty, overcrowded asylum where the group and countless other blind people have been quarantined. And the whole thing descends into anarchy basically. People are worried about the availability of food, necessities, no medicines are allowed inside, so even a small infection could end up deadly. Gangs start forming, they start raping women in exchange for giving them food. It just gets really, really bad. The only person in the land that doesn't get infected was the doctor's wife, and we follow how she has to try and help the group survive. At number 8 we have The Haunting of Hill House. It's not a horror if a haunted house isn't on this list, am I right? Written by Shirley Jackson and published in 1959, the book has been dubbed one of the best literary ghost stories in the 20th century. It went on to become 2 films, a play, and the basis of a Netflix series, so it's safe to say even in the 21st century we are getting a lot of inspiration from it. Shirley even drew the floor plans of the house and its outside before beginning the novel. The plot takes place in a mansion called Hill House and follows 4 main characters. An investigator of the supernatural, Eleanor, a shy girl, and a disabled mother, Theodora, and the mansion's heir, Luke. They all come to the house because of having experienced something paranormal or wanting to investigate the paranormal. The house itself has been the site of many deaths and suicides, and as their stay progresses, creepy things start happening, as they always do. The house itself seems sentient and angry, but the best part of the book is the narrator. We trust Eleanor from the start because she seems quite reliable and sweet, but as the book progresses she becomes more and more unreliable, she starts descending into madness, and then it gets confusing on whether the things happening in the house are really happening, or she's just seeing things or hallucinating them. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Filling our number 7 slot is The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know how I could have made this list and not included Hannibal Lecter. Written by Thomas Harris and published in 1988, the book is actually a sequel about the forensic psychiatrist and cannibalistic serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter. First of all, has anyone seen the show Hannibal? I watched the first season. I could literally only watch 1 episode a day, not even binge it, because it was just too taxing watching such screwed up things happen for so long. Like, I used to have to mentally prepare before watching it. But anyway, at this point Hannibal is already in jail, so the plot follows an FBI trainee called Clarice who is given the task of drawing up psychological profiles of serial killers, starting with Hannibal. Well, that's what she's told, but her real mission that she doesn't know about is to try and get Hannibal's help identify identifying a new serial killer on the loose dubbed Buffalo Bill. The plot follows her periodically visiting Hannibal and probing him about the killer. He gives her cryptic clues in exchange for knowing about her disturbing childhood as an orphan. This book won 2 awards for Best Novel and it's a literary gem. I haven't met anyone who hasn't heard of The Silence of the Lambs. Like, they won't even know what it is, but they would have heard of it for sure. Now at number 6 is Carrion Comfort. Written by Dan Simmons and published in 1989, it won the Locust Poll Award for Best Horror Novel, the Bram Stoker Award, and the August Derleth Award for Best Novel. Stephen King even calls it one of the greatest horror novels of the 20th century, so based on that, I reckon it's a pretty good book. The book focuses on a fraction of humanity who has intense psychic powers called the Ability. These people can control someone from a distance, and I mean control them, like physically too, as in they could make someone commit murder if they really wanted to. Killing someone indirectly gives the Ability users energy and youth, so they're almost like pseudo-vampires. The book sets up the fact the abilities have been used throughout time, whether that's fake charisma of a world leader, everyday murders, or the Holocaust. Although it's split into many timelines, it mostly follows a group of immoral people in the 80s, some of which want to take over the world. Investigators pursue a series of murders and realize these people really need to be stopped. It's honestly brutal. They get together in one scene and talk about all the people they killed, including John Lennon, and then later on 2 of them end up fighting but use normal humans around them as soldiers to fight each other. It's screwed up, but isn't every book on this list? Coming in at number 5 is A Head Full of Ghosts. Written by Paul G. Tremblay and published in 2015, the book follows an American family that's troubled. The dad is unemployed, they barely have any money, and then things get even worse due to the mental illness of their 14-year-old daughter, Marjorie. The book is told from the perspective of Marjorie's 8-year-old sister, Mary, and it starts when Marjorie starts telling Mary macabre stories instead of innocent Dr. Seuss ones. Welcome to the real world, Mary. Anyway, the dad, who is a born-again Catholic, decides Marjorie doesn't have a mental illness, she's demonically possessed, 2 very different things, and so he gets the help of his priest to try and exorcise her. And let's just say Marjorie is not really telling the truth. I'll leave it at that. At number 4 is Let the Right One In. Written by John Lindquist and published in English in 2008, the book is essentially a vampire story, but it's not like Twilight, before you guys just skip number 4. And for the record, I just like to say I read all the Twilight books and the books were actually really good. Please do not base the series on Kristen Stewart's acting, thank you. But anyway, the plot follows a 12-year-old boy called Oscar, a vampire child called Eli, and its caretaker Hakan. The story takes place in Stockholm in the 80s and focuses on a plethora of disturbing things like pedophilia, self-mutilation, murder, bullying, genital mutilation, etc. Oscar becomes friends with Eli when it moves in next door, and he finds out Eli was turned into a vampire when they were a child and hence forever remains in a young body and mind. Hakan, Eli's caretaker, was a former teacher who got caught with child pornography, and as you can imagine, he's very much in love with Eli and goes out and kills people and gets blood for them in order to sustain them in exchange for money. Even though Hakan would do it for free if Eli would let them be physically intimate, but we all know that's not gonna happen. The story goes on when Hakan gets caught on his last blood-procuring mission, and things just get worse and worse from there. Death, murder, acid throwing, blood drinking, the book has it all, and it was adapted into 2 feature films. Filling our number 3 slot is The House of Leaves, and this one is hard because half the people who've read it say it's a horror story, and the other half say it's a love story, and I mean there is horror in love and vice versa, so can it be both? But anyway, written by Mark Danielewski and published in 2000, the book itself is incredibly confusing. It has footnotes, and those footnotes have their own footnotes. Some pages just have a few words or a line of text. Some pages you have to rotate the book so you can actually read it. Some pages words are arranged in a way that mirror the story, but basically the format of the book is meant to make you feel claustrophobic. The plot has many narratives, but mostly follows a tattoo parlor employee called Johnny. Johnny's looking for a new apartment when his friend recommends a place in his building from a man who just died. When moving in, he finds an academic manuscript written by that man about a film called The Navidson Record. Except Johnny can't find any evidence of the film ever existing. The main plot focuses on the Navidson family story. The family come home from a trip one day and find that their house is expanded internally, but externally it looks exactly the same. There are more rooms, hallways upon hallways, and all of them are featureless and unlit, and there always just seems to be a low growl sound in the house. Characters start exploring the house and venture into the endless passageways, which ultimately leads to murder, insanity, and death. Now the second plot takes place in the footnotes, and it's about what's happening in Johnny's life, and it gets more and more unclear whether his obsession with the manuscript and consequent paranoia and delusions are because of madness, drug use, or the manuscript itself. The third and final mini-plot are letters woven in from Johnny's mother, who's in a psychiatric hospital. Honestly, with this book you really end up doubting your own perception of the story and what's fact and what isn't, and honestly, what more can you want from a book? Especially a horror book. Now number 2 is It, written by Stephen King, which I'm sure you all already knew, and published in 1986. It is iconic. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the book since the movies are all out as well, and regardless of whether you've seen them or not, I feel like everyone knows what it's about. The story follows a group of kids that call themselves the Losers Club. The kids realize they all encountered the same shape-shifting entity which took the form of their biggest fears. They named the thing It because they had no idea what it was. It wasn't human, it was genderless, it was it. They figure out It is behind all the child murders happening in the town, and they try to stop the evil clown. There's even a bit where Pennywise itself is narrating and telling the reader where it came from. The book is split into 2 timelines taking place 30 years apart, so we see the club as kids in the first one, and then we see them return to Derry in the second one because there's been another slew of child murders. I can't even count the amount of times people have recommended it to me and told me it genuinely scared the living hell out of them, and I still refuse to read it. I'm just not gonna do it. That's not me. And finally, at number 1 is Rosemary's Baby, written by Eerie and published in 1967. The book sold over 4 million copies, and that made it the best-selling horror novel of the 60s. The plot follows Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband Guy, who recently move into an old Gothic apartment building. Despite being warned about the building's strange history involving murder and witchcraft, they move in anyway. And the couple are quickly welcomed by neighbors Minnie and Roman, who Rosemary gets a weird vibe from. Due to some freak accident blinding his theatrical rival, Guy gets a great role and agrees to try for their first kid. Hurrah! But not. But that night, Rosemary has a sexual dream involving an inhuman creature, and the next day she has claw scratches all over her boobs, on her crotch, basically everywhere. And then somehow she becomes pregnant, but then falls severely ill, losing more and more weight and craving raw meat. Everything goes tits up, and I can 100% say Guy is not the father.
Number 10. Codex Gigas. Right off the hop, this book is said to give the reader the ability to harness evil and negative energy, and it's often referred to as the Devil's Bible. Already into it, here we go folks. The book was first discovered in 1648 during the 30 Years' War. The Swedish army looted Prague, and amongst the haul was the Codex Gigas. Yeah, hard to miss this one. 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and 8.7 inches thick, coming in at 156 pounds. Yeah, it's a little thicker than Bernstein Bears. You're not gonna miss it. It's said that this book was actually written by a monk, but said monk had broken his spiritual vows. He was of course punished, but in a pretty extreme way, which is said to be sealed behind a wall and then left there for eternity to die. Just behind a wall forever. Right before his passing though, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish said book, which is then when he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete the book for him because he was busy, behind a wall and stuff. Yeah, like unemployed professors back then. The devil's like, I'll do that essay for you. No sweat. Take a 5, brother. Sell your soul. I got you. I'll script it. This book is filled with dark rituals, instructions on how to perform exorcisms, as well as a bunch of creepy drawings of the devil and other demons. Just for fun. Right now it's said that the book has 310 pages, but that once used to be 320. Those 10 pages that were ripped out were said to contain instructions on how someone could summon the devil. So hopefully whoever has those pages burn them, or I don't know, made a nice birthday card with them. That'd be fun. Number 9. The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. Little wordy in my opinion, but it's also a pretty good book. This book was of course created by Abramelin, who is in the title, who is indeed a mage, and he created this book as a gift for his son. Yeah, Lego wasn't a thing yet, and neither was fun, so he got him a magical book. Thanks, Dad. In the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and that's when the rumors of the book being cursed began to spread, of course. I mean, this book contains spells, but also contains curses, so I feel like that rumor, it checks out, people are talking for a reason. Abramelin believed that everybody had their own personal demon. The good thing about this book, however, is that it holds instructions on how to get your demons under control through rituals and spiritual situations. The kicker is that it's always risky to reach out to the spiritual world, so it's really not worth it, right? That's why everybody thinks this book is so cursed. Unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book might just be too powerful for you, my friend. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explain either bad luck or hauntings from the spiritual world are awaiting for those who read it. So yeah, stick with Arthur or Berenstain Bears, really, keep it cool. Number 8, the Book of Black Magic and Pacts. At first I thought this said Black Magic and Pets, and I got really excited for a hot moment. This book, written by A.E. Waite, is a guide on all things occult. It looks at lore, magic, occultist history, and of course ceremonies. There's certainly no issue with all this in itself in a book, but when this book is in the wrong hands, things can get a little dicey, especially considering this book has been referred to as one of the greatest overviews of occultism, and it includes a large number of magical spells from a variety of sources. Yeah, they all have spells in them. They're all like Harry Potter. They're all like the Chamber of Secrets, that book that he stabs with the tooth. They're all like that. They're all bad. The author of this book, A.E. Waite, is said to have been a British scholarly mystic as well as a poet, and it's said that he was quite a prolific writer on both the occult and esoteric matters. Nice, but he was an occult or two, but he was great with a pen. Number 7, the Munich Manual. Also referred to as the Necromancer's Manual, that's always fun. This grimoire comes to us from the 15th century and is a text that is largely focused on demonology and necromancy. Two things you want in a book. A lot of grimoires have both good and black magic, but this is one that focuses solely on the dark, bad side, know what I mean? Just in case you're a very specific demon, this book is for you. You won't believe number 4. Dive in, here you go. There are 3 different sections to this one. First section deals with the illusionist magic and spells that trick people into seeing things that aren't there. The next one is psychological magic, which is meant to use emotions, politics, and things like that in order to gain power over an individual. And if these 2 weren't scary enough, the 3rd section is the divinatory spells, which is meant to allow the reader to see into the past, present, or future. Imagine seeing into the present. What a waste that would be. You're just looking in a cauldron like, hey, that's me looking into the cauldron right now. It's like the game Portal, you're like, oh my god, it's crazy, it's so trippy. All sections are bad news in this book, but one of the most popular parts of said book is the part that includes instructions on how to make the Mirror of Lilith. We have our own Mirror of Lilith right here. I look into it every day. No spoilers, I'm only on season 27 of Life. Please don't tell me how I'm gonna pass. Thanks. Number 6, The Orphan Story. This book was originally written in the early 1600s, but it didn't end up getting published until 2018, because, you know, things take a while sometimes. We were a bit busy. The Orphan Story is about a 14-year-old Spanish boy who heads to the Americas, you know, a classic coming-of-age tale, a feel-good story, dare I say, until it isn't anymore. This is exactly the reason why it took so long for said book to be published. While the curse in this book doesn't come from the story itself, there's something that happens, there's something dark lurking in those pages, and people end up taking their own lives. It's horrible. The book's publisher, Belinda Palacios, who worked on the book for 2 years, explained that throughout those years, she was often warned of the cursed book and how every publisher who had tried to work on it before ended up passing away in a mysterious, tragic kind of way before they could finish the book. You know what I mean? Some Final Destination stuff would kind of happen here. Her research showed that those who tried to edit the book before either found themselves in horrible accidents or with strange illnesses, right? One of the two. Luckily, Belinda made it through the process unscathed for now, so let's just hope that maybe the curse has been lifted. Either way, I can't read, so I'm not gonna get there anytime soon. Number 5, The Grand Grimoire. This book is often referred to as the book with incredible powers, and it's been called one of the darkest books in the world, right next to Holes. Those two are tied right now. While the author of this book is still unknown, classic, the contents of it are things like black magic, dark spooky secrets, occult information, anything I just talked about, more of that. It's believed that the book was written sometime around 1521 and it's split into 2 books. Yeah, classic. He's like, but wait, there's more. Tune in next week. $15. Give me it right now. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get the demon to do your bidding, do your house chores, whatever you want. Maybe even answer some phone calls, sure. The second book is split into 2 parts and it details how to make a pact with the demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means that it's significantly more riskier than the first book. They're like, hey, you can do this, but it's gonna cost you. Come to this book. People fear the Grand Grimoire because they worry that if anyone reads it fully, then the devil will then enslave their soul. Okay, you said it. We're turning that one. Next, number 4, the Book of Soiga. Anything that is referred to as the Book of Death, ho, count me in. I'll renew my library card right now. Let's do it. Let's amp it up. The Book of Soiga, this one's tough because nobody knows what language it's written in, right? So that's obviously a challenge. The beginning part of the book definitely contains some spells or incantations, and the ending of the book is really where the most mystery lies, and trying to decipher it is not that easy. It's said that a scholar called John Dee once attempted to decode the secret book, and it was so difficult that he needed to call on an angel, the angel Uriel, for help. Everyone's calling demons and angels for help. I'm like, can I do that? If I call in sick one day, can I call a demon? I don't know, we could do that. Even the angel didn't have the answers on this part, and he instructed John to call on the archangel, Michael, who would be the only one who was really able to interpret said text. After John Dee passed away in 1608, the book basically just vanished. No one knows where it went, but then, like magic, it just reappeared again in the 19th century. Despite this extremely interesting story and how it kind of draws you in, whoever is said to read the book will die 2.5 years later. So, is it worth it? Do we want to have 2 years left of our life for a book? If it's Avatar 2 and they're like, hey, you have 2 years to live after you see Avatar 2, I'd be like, okay, maybe. But this book, I'm like, nah, none of that, I'm good. Number 3, the Picatrix. This is a grimoire that is said to contain a large amount of magic that is presumed to be from the 11th century. The pages contain some philosophy, some astrology, some medieval science, stuff like that. And then there's things like recipes that involve mixing human and or animal blood. So it's one of those. Not so fun, and yeah, it's not so fun. Not a lot of pictures to color in, you know? The results are said to be magical, of course, but in reality it's just a book on mixing horrible things together, like illicit substances and urine. Mix them together, put them in a cauldron. I'm like, no. How about that? Number 2, Sorrows of Young Werther. This is a book that came out in 1774 and it's said to have a large and negative impact on its readers right since its release. The book will summon your own inner demon, apparently. Right after this book came out, a huge wave of its readers ended up taking their own lives because of the strange and dark influence that this book had on those who read it. Young men would start trying to emulate the main character of the book by dressing like him, acting like him, that sort of thing. Not really shocking here. But the book ultimately led to horrifying actions, so in real life these guys would also take their own lives. It was horrible. This actually led to the book being banned in some countries because, well, it's not worth the risk. See, things like this make me curious, of course, but I don't think I'd ever want to read something that depressing anyways, you know what I mean? Number 1, the Lesser Key of Solomon. This one is said to contain spells that are used for summoning over 72 different demons. And just to spice it up a little bit, to this day, no one is exactly sure who wrote it. Yeah, it's still anonymous back there, penning it up. Could have been one of the 72 demons, who knows? The Lesser Key of Solomon is made up of a few different texts from somewhere around the 17th century. This book is said to be cursed, so even having a copy of it will cause the owner to experience constant bad luck or have the worst luck of all by, passing away, biting the bullet. One person shared that the book violently just flew itself across the room at them, just like Interstellar. We just got a haunted bookshelf now to take care of. All because you bought a weird book at a garage sale, know what I mean? While we aren't sure who wrote it, there are rumors or stories that suggest that it might have been King Solomon. It is said that perhaps he wrote it for his son and then asked him to bury it with him in his grave. When being prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found said book, and this is when they were visited by an angel who told them to hide the book from the unworthy. Yeah, only the worthy can read this one. They then placed a spell on the book, which is meant to keep it away from getting into the wrong hands, and it's said to be how the book got its curse in the first place. So, if a friend lets you borrow Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, just ask them. Ask if it's cursed before,
Starting off this countdown, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther. This book has been famously associated with something referred to as the Werther effect because of the negative impact it had on readers. So this book came out in 1774 and it inspired a huge wave of people taking their lives. It was a terrible epidemic. That's how strong the influence had on its readers. So young men started to copy the main character in the book. They would dress the same as he was portrayed in the book, and then later would take their own lives the way that he did in the book. This caused the book to be banned in countries such as Denmark and Italy. It was so bad that people believed this book was cursed, and every young man that read it will soon be tempted to take their own life, even if they were in the right mindset.
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Orphan's Story. This book was originally written in the early 1600s, but it didn't end up getting published until 2018. The Orphan's Story is about a 14-year-old Spanish boy who heads to the Americas. You know, a classic coming-of-age feel-good story, right? Well, not exactly, and that is the reason it took so long for it to be published. While the curse in this book doesn't come from the story itself, there is something dark lurking in those pages. The book's publisher, Belinda Palacios, who worked on the book for 2 years, explained that throughout those years, she was often warned of the cursed book and how every publisher who had tried to work on it before ended up passing away in a mysterious way before they were able to finish the book. When Belinda looked into this, it turned out to be true. Her research showed that those who tried to edit the book before either found themselves in horrible accidents or with strange illnesses. Luckily, Belinda made it through the process unscathed, so let's hope that maybe the curse has been lifted. Either way, it's probably one I'll personally stay away from.
Moving on to number 8, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a cursed grimoire that is said to contain summoning spells for over 72 demons, and no one knows who wrote it. What we do know though is that this book contains a bunch of compiled texts from the 17th century. Some of these texts tell the reader how to conjure and control spirits or demons. This book is apparently so cursed that anyone who keeps a copy of it will die or experience constant bad luck. One person who owned a copy of the book reported the book's pages turning on its own. Another time, the book violently flew across the room and towards them. Although we don't know who wrote the book, legend has it that King Solomon originally wrote it for his son. He then asked him to be buried with it. But apparently, when he was getting prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and one of them got a vision from an angel. The angel told him to hide the book from the unworthy, so he decided to cast a spell on it to keep it from getting into the wrong hands. And that's how the book got cursed.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the Untitled Grimoires. A witch's spellbook should never be messed with. I feel like that should be obvious, but I'll put that out there because apparently it isn't. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spellbooks that were sold online for $14,000 in 2013. The books were written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca who was the leader of a coven, and they detail things like spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. So, witch stuff. This is all fine and well unless you're sitting there thinking about how you don't believe. If you are a non-believer, it is best to stay as far away as possible from these books. The seller of the books warned that any non-believers who mess with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse, and on the first page of the book, the Wiccan herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It reads, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hands of the craft." I think we can all appreciate the heads up she gave us on this one. Again, this is just another one I'll probably stay far away from, and not just because I don't have $14,000 to spend on a pair of books.
Coming in at number 6, we have The Catcher in the Rye. This book has been linked to a number of murders. It's believed that the book might have inspired these killings. First, we have John Lennon. When John Lennon was shot by Mark David Chapman, apparently he calmly sat down on the curb and started flipping through The Catcher in the Rye as he waited for the police. In fact, inside the book, it was later discovered he wrote, and I quote, "To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement." And he signed it Holden's name, who is the main character in the book. Furthermore, when police arrested him, he said, and I quote, "I'm sure the big part of me is Holden. The small part of me must be the devil." And during his trial, he even read from the book when it was his turn to address the court. But he's not the only one that's been influenced by this book. After John Hinckley Jr.'s assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, it was discovered he too was a fan of the book, and a copy was even found on the table in his hotel room. And lastly, let's talk about Robert John Bardo. He took the life of Rebecca Schaeffer. Well, he had the book in his back pocket while he did the deed. The list goes on and on. There are a dozen more people that apparently got inspired by this book and went on to harm or take someone's life. So some people believe that this book is in fact cursed and will drive the sane insane.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. When you're a practitioner of magic, you probably don't give the same sort of gifts that non-magic folk do. So it is no surprise that Abramelin gifted his son a book of spells and curses. In the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and ever since then, there have been rumors swirling that the book is cursed, which makes a ton of sense considering, like I mentioned, it is a book of curses. Rumor has it that the cursed nature of this book in part has to do with Abramelin's belief that everyone has their own personal demon. The book holds instructions on how to get your demons under control through rituals and supernatural situations, and it is always risky to reach out to the spirit world, so maybe that's why everyone is feeling like this book is cursed. It's looking like unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book just might be too powerful. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explain either bad luck or hauntings from the spirit world or what await for those who dare to read it.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is this massive 310-page book said to harness evil and negative energy. It was discovered in 1648 and is 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, 8.7 inches thick, and weighs 165 pounds. So now there's this really creepy legend surrounding it. Legend goes that the book was written by a monk, but this monk broke his spiritual vows and his punishment was to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. The night before his death, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish this book. So he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that this book was finished by the devil himself. To make things creepier, this book is filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. On one page, there's a 19-inch frightening drawing of Satan. And apparently the book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and facts like how to perform exorcisms. To top it all off, apparently at some point the book contained 320 pages, not just 310. Those 10 pages were ripped out because they instructed people on how to summon the devil. And thank gosh for that.
In our number 3 spot today, we have the Book of Soiga. This one is often referred to as the Book of Death, and that alone is enough to deter me. If you happen to be braver than I, unfortunately it is unlikely that you'll be able to actually read parts of this book because nobody knows what language it is written in. While the first part of the book details different spells and incantations, the ending part is the most mysterious and where the secrets lie. All the letters in the final part are written in separate boxes, and despite people trying their absolute best, it is extremely difficult to decipher. An Elizabethan scholar named John Dee attempted to decode the book, and he apparently called on an angel named Uriel for help. The angel explained to him that only the Archangel Michael is able to interpret the text. Apparently after John Dee passed away, this book mysteriously vanished, seemingly into thin air. This was in 1608, and for years and years no one could find it until it magically reappeared again in the 19th century. I don't know about you guys, but to me that sounds like some real magic. The catch with this one, however, is that it is said that whoever deciphers the meaning of the code will inevitably die 2.5 years later. So I guess this is like the Ring of books?
In our second spot, we have the Prophecies of Nostradamus. We've talked about this dude a bunch on this channel. Basically, he's a really famous seer and prophet. He's most famous for his book Les Prophéties, which contains hundreds of predictions for future events. And what's scary is that a bunch of these predictions have come true, such as JFK's assassination, the creation of the atomic bomb, rain, and the Great Fire of London, so on and so on. So he's got some credibility. But here's the thing. Are these actually predictions, or are they a list of curses Nostradamus set out for us? A number of people think that it's the second option, and that he literally has cursed us all. He has made these things happen even from beyond the grave. In fact, he managed to curse his grave, so what says he doesn't have the power to curse a book too? Like literally he warned everyone, whoever opens my tomb will be cursed. And guess what? Legend goes that one day during a war, a couple of soldiers accidentally dug up his grave. When they did, they found him with a plaque that said 1793 on it. That was the year they opened the grave. So he predicted when his grave would be disturbed. Not only that, one of the soldiers picked up his skull and immediately was shot dead by a sniper. So yeah, the soldiers were cursed by him, and now we're all cursed by him and this book.
In our number 1 spot today, we have the Grand Grimoire. This book is often referred to as the book with incredible power and has been called one of the darkest books in the world. While the author of this book is still unknown, the contents of it are things like black magic and dark, spooky secrets. It is believed that the book was written sometime around 1521, and it is split into 2 books. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get the demon to do your bidding. The second book is split into 2 parts, and it details how to make a pact with a demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means it is significantly riskier than the instructions in the first book. Apparently in the book it even details how someone can call upon Lucifer or the devil. The book describes a few different demons, and it also gives spells that one can do for things like winning the lottery, love spells, becoming invisible. You know, while those spells certainly sound nice, magic like that always comes at a cost. People fear the Grand Grimoire because they worry that if anyone reads it fully, then the devil will enslave their soul. No thank you. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon. This is a grimoire that is said to be cursed. It is said to contain spells that are used for summoning over 72 different demons, and just to add a little air of mystery, no one is exactly sure who wrote it. This is because the book is made up of a few different texts that have been compiled from somewhere around the 17th century. This book is said to be so cursed that even just having a copy of it will cause the owner to either experience constant bad luck or have the worst luck of all with past passing away. People have shared their terrifying stories with the book, and they include the book's pages turning on their own, and another person shared that the book violently flew itself across the room at them. How terrifying would that be? While we aren't sure who wrote it, there are rumors or stories that suggest it might have been King Solomon. It is said that perhaps he wrote it for his son and then asked him to bury it with him in his grave. When being prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and this is when they were visited by an angel who told them to hide the book from the unworthy. They then placed a spell on the book which was meant to keep it from getting into the wrong hands, and that is said to be how the book got its curse. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Untitled Grimoires. A witch's spellbook should never be messed with. I feel like that should be obvious, but I'll put that out there because apparently it isn't. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spellbooks that were sold online for $14,000 in 2013. The books were written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca who was the leader of a coven, and they detail things like spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. So, witch stuff. This is all fine and well unless you're sitting here thinking about how you don't believe. If you are a non-believer, it is best to stay as far away as possible from these books. The seller of the books warned that any non-believers who mess with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse, and on the first page of the book, the Wiccan herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It reads, quote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." That's a pretty sound warning, and one I probably wouldn't just roll the dice on. You know, just to be safe. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther. We've got a lot of books on this list that are said to contain magic and spells, and this one is a little different from the others on this list because it doesn't. This is a book that came out in 1774, and it is said to have had a large and negative impact on its readers since its release. Apparently, after this book came out, a huge wave of its readers ended up taking their own lives because of this strange and dark influence it had on those who read it. Young men would start trying to emulate the main character of the book by dressing like him, acting like him, that sort of thing, before following his horrifying actions in the book. This actually led to the book being banned in some countries, and for the most part, I'm pretty opposed to the banning of books, but I feel like this is one I can probably get behind. It is believed that even people who were in a completely fine headspace prior to reading the book would still be tempted to follow the dark path after reading it, which is exactly what has led people to believe that this book is cursed. In our number 7 spot today, we have The Picatrix. This is a grimoire that is said to contain a large amount of magic that is presumed to be from the 11th century. This text has long been considered pretty obscene because of the graphic content that exists within it. The pages contain some scholarly work with philosophy, astrology, and even some medieval science, which is actually pretty cool. But then there are things like recipes for concoctions that involve mixing human and animal blood, brains, urine, and other bodily fluids in with or other kinds of dangerous substances. The results are said to be magical, but I am far from convinced. This one definitely isn't the darkest or the spookiest on this list today, which is a nice refresher, and while some of what this book contains is definitely historically interesting, I think it's probably best to stay away from the magic and spells that lurk within. In our number 6 spot today, we have The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. This book was of course created by Abramelin, who was indeed a mage, and he created it as a gift for his son. At the time, his son was probably like, a book for my birthday? Thanks, I guess. Books are intimidating. Like, no one really liked Holes the first time they read it. Actually, that's a lie. That's still one of the best books I've ever read. But I bet his son was like Harry Potter with a Half-Blood Prince potions textbook, you know? At first you don't really know what to make of it, but that stuff comes in handy later. Anyway, in the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and that is when the rumors of the book being cursed began to spread. I mean, this book contained spells, but it also contained curses, so I feel like that rumor likely makes a lot of sense. It is said that this rumor has to do with Abramelin's belief that everyone has their own personal demon. I'm just hoping that mine is cool and nice. The good thing about this book, however, is that it holds instructions on how to get your demon under control through rituals and supernatural situations, but then the kicker with this is that it is always exceptionally risky to reach out to the spirit world, so maybe that's why everyone was feeling like this book is cursed. It's looking like unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book just might be too powerful. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explained either bad luck or hauntings from the spirit world are what await for those who dare to read it. In our number 5 spot today, we have The Book of Black Magic and Pacts. This book, written by A.E. Waite, is an exhaustive guide to all things occult. It looks at lore, magic, occultist history, and ceremonies. There's certainly no issue with this itself, but when in the wrong hands, things can certainly get a little dicey, especially considering this book has been referred to as one of the greatest overviews of occultism, and it includes a large number of magical spells from a variety of sources. This book is said to also contain rituals of transcendental magic and rituals of black magic. The author of this book, A.E. Waite, is said to have been a British scholarly mystic as well as a poet, and it is said that he was quite a prolific writer on both occult and esoteric matters. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Codex Gigas. This book is said to give the reader the ability to harness evil and negative energy, and is also often referred to as the Devil's Bible. This book was first discovered in 1648 and is massive at 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and 8.7 inches thick, and here's what's weird. It weighs 165 pounds. It is said that this book was actually written by a monk, but this monk had broken his spiritual vows. He was of course punished, but in a pretty extreme way, which was to be sealed behind a wall and then left there to die. Right before his passing, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish the book, which is when he then summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. If I knew you could do that, I would have summoned Lucifer to finish all my book reports in school. I guess I probably wouldn't have been cool with the whole selling your soul thing though. It is said that this book is filled with dark rituals, instructions on how to perform exorcisms, as well as a bunch of creepy drawings of the devil and other demons. Right now it is said that this book has 310 pages, but that it once used to have 320. The 10 pages that were ripped out were said to contain instructions on how someone could summon the devil, so hopefully whoever had those 10 pages destroyed them right away. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Grand Grimoire. This book is often referred to as the book with incredible power and has been called one of the darkest books in the world. While the author of this book is still unknown, the contents of it are things like black magic and dark, spooky secrets. It is believed that the book was written sometime around 1521, and it is split into 2 books. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get the demon to do your bidding. The second book is split into 2 parts, and it details how to make a pact with a demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means it is significantly riskier than the instructions in the first book. Apparently in the book it even details how someone can call upon Lucifer or the devil, so I guess who needs those 10 missing pages in the Codex Gigas? Just go out and get the Grand Grimoire and you're right back in the devil summoning game, no worries. The book describes a few different demons, and it also gives spells that one can do for things like winning the lottery, love spells, becoming invisible, you know, magic stuff. While those spells certainly sound nice, magic like that always comes at a cost. People fear the Grand Grimoire because they worry that if anyone reads it fully, then the devil will enslave their soul. No thank you. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Book of Soiga. Anything that is referred to as the Book of Death is definitely one I'll most likely spend some time trying to stay away from. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that is the least inviting thing I've ever heard in my life. If you don't agree with me on that sentiment, however, the tough thing with this one is that nobody knows exactly what language it is written in. The beginning part of the book definitely contains some spells and incantations. The ending of the book really is where the most mystery lies, and trying to decipher it is no easy task. It is said that a scholar named John Dee once attempted to decode the secret book, and it was so difficult that he needed to call on the angel Uriel for help. Even the angel didn't have the answers and instructed John to call on the archangel Michael, who would be the only one who was able to interpret the text. Here's where this mystery book gets more mysterious though. After John Dee passed away in 1608, the book basically just vanished and no one knew where it went, but then, like magic, it just reappears in the 19th century. Despite this extremely interesting story and how it kind of draws you in like you wish you could crack the code that this book holds, it's best to stay away from because it is said whoever is able to decipher the ending of this book will inevitably die 2.5 years later, so is it really worth it? You don't even get a cool phone call to give you a heads up either. No girl coming out of the well, you just get me telling you on the internet. This is the worst sequel to The Ring ever. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Munich Manual. Also referred to as the Necromancer's Manual, this grimoire comes to us from the 15th century and is a text that is largely focused on demonology and necromancy. A lot of grimoires have both good and dark magic, but this is one that focuses solely on the dark black magic. There are 3 different sections to this one. The first section deals with illusionist magic and spells that trick people into seeing things that aren't there. The next is psychological magic, which is meant to use emotions, religions, politics, and things like that in order to gain power over another individual. And if these two weren't scary enough, the third section is divinatory spells, which are meant to allow the reader to see into the past, present, or future. One of the most well-known parts of this book is the part that includes instructions on how to make the Mirror of Lilith, which is for the purpose of divination we just talked about.
Starting us off at number 10, the Book of Soiga. During Queen Elizabeth I's reign, one of her trusted advisors, John Dee, was a mathematician and astronomer who was beyond obsessed with the occult, who with the help of his medium spent much of his life trying to decipher this strange magic Latin book. Often referred to as the Book That Kills, it is said that John Dee struggled to decipher the final 36 pages, so he summoned the archangel Uriel to help with the translation. However, Uriel explained that the book only came into existence when Adam ended paradise, and so it could only be interpreted by the archangel Michael. However, what's perhaps most interesting and strange about this book is that after John Dee's death in the early 17th century, the book disappeared off the face of the planet for 385 years, only showing up again in 1994 when two copies appeared, one in a British library, the other in a Bodleian library. Now, scholars are still trying to figure out its mysteries, but the book is not an easy code to crack. So far, they've found a disturbingly complicated codex of demonology, magical incantations, and astrology, all of which could potentially cause quite a bit of havoc should the book end up in the wrong hands. Plus, if the legend surrounding it is true, then whoever deciphers the final 36 pages is fated to die within 2.5 years. Coming in at number 9, the Necronomicon. Besides being a tongue twister, the Necronomicon is a truly nightmarish book that not only is said to contain the power to resurrect the dead, but it's also described as being bound in human skin. So already we're off to a cursed start. Now, to be fair, the catch with this book is that it is a fictional grimoire that at one point in time only existed in the world of horror writer H.P. Lovecraft. However, as notoriety grew for the book, a physical version was created, and some say that it holds all the same horrors as the Necronomicon from Lovecraft's writings. Essentially, the fear around this book is that while its origins may have been fictional, bringing it into existence could have brought forward the demons that it speaks of, and some believe that opening it could open up a whole world of demons this world is not prepared to face. Coming in at number 8, the Munich Manual. Sometimes referred to as the Necromancer's Manual, this 15th century Latin grimoire centers solely around demonology and the use of dark magic. But what exactly is so spooky about this book? Well, the manual is broken down into 3 sections: illusionist magic, psychological magic, and divination, and goes into intricate details about how to use each of these kinds of magic to get what you want from people. Illusionist magic is pretty much what it sounds like, creating spells that trick people into seeing things that aren't there, while psychological magic is meant to emotionally manipulate others, and of course divination is used to see into the past or future. Now, I suppose, like anything, in the right hands this wouldn't be so bad, but we're imagining the worst possible scenarios over here. Plus, if it were just those 3 things, we might be able to brush it off, but it also goes into how to summon demons and such, so yeah, definitely not a book that should have ever been opened. Coming in at number 7, The Orphan Story. Unlike some of the others on this list, this next book isn't an ancient text or evil manual, but an epic novel written in the early 17th century by Martin de Leon y Cardenas, a monk who broke his sacred vow. However, before you get too comfortable, let me tell you why this is a book you should stay very, very, very far away from. Despite being written some 400 years ago, this book wasn't actually published until 2018. And the reason being is that prior to that, every other publication fell through because the involved parties kept dying under mysterious circumstances. Some fell ill and died suddenly, others got into freak accidents, and this pattern continued for just about everyone who came into contact with it. Which, I don't know, maybe that should have been a sign, but hey. Coming in at number 6, Voynich Manuscript. Filled with bizarre symbols, undecipherable language, and crude drawings of nude women, the Voynich Manuscript is mainly of concern because no one is actually able to determine what the heck it's about. So I guess it's kind of a devil you know versus devil you don't kind of situation. From what experts have been able to decipher, the manuscript appears to date back to Central Europe, sometime in the late 15th century or early 16th century, and is thought to be an occult book of some kind due to the references to medicinal herbs and zodiac symbols. But beyond that, it's kind of one large mysterious and creepy book with an unknown author. The first known owner of the book was an alchemist, George Barash, but strangely, George apparently had no idea what the book was or how it became one of his possessions, which I mean is definitely very odd. Of course, like many unsolved mysteries, there are some conspiracy theories that have followed it around, the wildest one claiming that the text was brought to Earth by aliens, hence why George would have no knowledge of how it came to be in his house and would explain why no one can figure out the language it's written in. Believers in this conspiracy also say that deciphering the manuscript will unleash the curse, killing anyone who reads it from that point forward. I mean, could it be nothing? Sure. But does that mean I am keen to find out for myself? Absolutely not. Coming in at number 5, the Aura Linda book. So I will start off by saying that the general belief is that this book is not a real ancient text, but rather a forgery disguised to look like one. However, forgery or not, it was still written by someone and is super duper evil, so it definitely deserves a spot on this list. The Aura Linda book first came to public awareness in the 1860s. However, it wasn't until the 1930s when the so-called historical manuscript became a favorite of World War II Germans and its association with occultism began. Leaders like Heinrich Himmler considered this book the Nordic Bible and believed that it confirmed that the Aryans were the original people of Atlantis and essentially all of Western civilization, thus further embedding their views of white supremacy. To this day, there are some with the same beliefs as Himmler who use this book to defend their twisted beliefs, and for that reason, it may just be the darkest book of all. Coming in at number 4, the Picatrix. Presumed to be from the 11th century, this grimoire of Arabic magic has long been considered one of the most disturbing books in history. Now, unlike some of the others on this list, you won't find much about demons or the devil, but instead scholarly work filled with philosophy, astrology, and medieval science, which by itself would be just fine. But along with all of that are some of the most insane recipes known to mankind. For example, there are recipes for concoctions that mix humans and animals' blood, brains, urine, and other bodily fluids with opium or other dangerous substances, promising to achieve magical results. Some recipes promise a transfiguration of sorts, for example. Should you wish to appear in the form of an animal, all you have to do, apparently, is take the semen of a healthy man and put it in an eggshell, together with the semen of the animal you wish to become. From there, simply leave the egg buried in warm manure for 3 days, and your wish will be granted. Now, that is just one spell. There are hundreds of others to choose from, but if that's the general vibe, then, well, I'm good. Coming in at number 3, the Lesser Key of Solomon. Also known as the Clavicula Salomonis Regis, the Lesser Key of Solomon is believed to be a cursed grimoire of demonology that should absolutely never be toyed with. Now, no one is entirely certain who the author or authors were, but it's estimated to have been compiled somewhere in the 17th century, which kind of makes it extra creepy, just considering that it's an old book with no known author. Inside the cursed book, you can apparently find recipes for love potions or liquors of persuasion, and if that isn't quite up your alley, do not fret. It's also said to contain passages on how to conjure spirits and demons, as well as how to control these entities to do your bidding, which, frankly, if you are conjuring a demon, I'm not sure there is much you, a human, could do to control it, but also I'm not out to test that theory, so Who knows, maybe I'm wrong. On top of detailed instructions about how to conjure dangerous demons, there is also a guide on how to become invisible, as well as locate missing objects, which at least that's a bit more practical. But either way, this is not a book you should be snooping around inside, as it's reportedly so cursed that it will doom anyone who so much as has it on their bookshelf. Allegedly, those that have owned it have experienced the book flying violently across the room, pages turning by themselves, and haunting visitations from a shadow creature, which pretty much proves that this book should have never been opened in the first place. Coming in at number 2, Codex Giga. If there was a contest for the largest book, I would definitely put this one in the running. Measuring 3 feet long and weighing 165 pounds, this Latin manuscript is not only massive in size, but also massive in terms of the amount of disturbing content that can be found inside. Written in the 13th century by a Benedictine monk, this gigantic manuscript contains a wide-ranging array of information, from a complete copy of the Bible to how to perform an exorcism. So why is it so disturbing, you might be wondering? Well, first off, besides the Bible stuff, it's filled with dark rituals and imagery, including a 19-inch drawing of the devil. But the real curse all has to do with its origins. According to legend, it's said the monk who wrote the novel had actually broken his vows, and so was sentenced to die entombed behind a brick wall. His fate closing in on him, the night before his death, he decided to write down everything he knew about the human experience. However, as you can probably imagine, not many people can write a 620-page book in one evening, especially when you have to manually scribe the entire thing. So realizing he would not finish before he would be sent to death, he summoned Lucifer, and in exchange for his help offered his soul for the rest of eternity. Meaning, the book was allegedly completed by the devil himself. And last up today in our number 1 spot, the Grand Grimoire. Widely regarded as the most potent and deadly of the occult books in existence, the Grand Grimoire was written sometime in the 16th century and remains not only one of the most disturbing books of all time, but just maybe the most dangerous one too. As legend has it, the author of this grimoire was possessed by the devil at the time of writing, and so over time it has also become known as the Gospel of Satan, and it's certainly filled with enough dark content to make that seem true. Filled to the brim with dark incantations that can allegedly teach readers how to summon powerful demons or even bring back the dead, it's said that anyone who so much as opens the book is offering their soul to the devil, which is a pretty hefty price to pay for opening a book. However, if you are looking to command a legion of demons, I suppose that Satan's gotta get something out of it.
Number 10. Untitled Grimoires. The Untitled Grimoires is a set of 2 handwritten, spiral-bound spellbooks that were sold by an online retailer for nearly $14,000 back in 2013. The books were handwritten in the 1960s by Persephone Ajostri Irene, a high priestess of Wicca who supposedly led her own coven. All 250 pages are filled with incantations, spells, enchantments, and details on how to summon spirits and demons. However, there is a serious catch. The seller warns buyers that any non-believers who mess with the book would bring a deadly curse upon themselves, while Persephone herself tells readers on the first page that proceeding with the book would have serious consequences. She wrote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." The buyer and the location of the book is currently unknown, but my question is, why would you want to buy this? Even if you are a believer, wouldn't you still be scared? Number 9. Necronomicon. The Necronomicon, also referred to as the Book of the Dead, is considered one of the most haunted books of all time. What does this book have in store? Well, you can find scary figures on each page of this book, and you can contact your loved ones who are not alive. It contains the exact way to contact the dead souls, but be warned, bringing back the dead is not for the weak. Necronomicon has also appeared in famous series like Friday the 13th and Evil Dead series. Currently, its original copy is kept in a locker of Massachusetts Masonic University. People really don't want this book to get out, so it has to be haunted, right? Number 8. The Orphan Story. We all know it can be hard to get a book published. I mean, hey, the Harry Potter transcript was denied 12 different times. But this book took 400 years to get published. The Orphan Story was written in the early 1600s by Martin de Leon Cardenas. The Orphan Story is a novel about a 14-year-old Spaniard who heads to the Americas in search of fortune. Now, this sounds like a fairly normal, feel-good adventure story, but a major darkness lurks within its pages that led to the novel not being published until 2018. Belinda Paliquios, a prover and scholar who edited the book for 2 years, says that she was warned by multiple people about the Orphan Story. They told her that the book was cursed, and the reason it had taken so long to publish was that anyone who worked on it would die in mysterious ways. While she initially laughed it off, research showed that those who previously edited the book died in horrific car accidents or of strange illnesses. My question is, why did she still agree to edit it? And did certain powers not want the ancient script out in the world? Nonetheless, it was published in 2018, and since then Belinda remains alive and well, so hopefully the curse is gone, but I still wouldn't want to read this book though. Number 7. Long Lost Friend. Long Lost Friend was written and published by John George Homan in 1820. The book contains a variety of folk remedies, spells, and talismans from the folk magic tradition known as powwow. While the book itself is intended to not be cursed, as it contains wonderful and well-tested remedies and arts for men, as well as livestock, according to its original German title, the book took on a sinister reputation following the so-called Hex Hollow murder committed by John Bleemer, John Curry, and Wilbert Hess. The 3 men broke into the home of their neighbor, Nelson Rehmeyer, because they said he had put a curse on them. They were trying to find his copy of The Long Lost Friend and destroy it in order to end their affliction. They were unable to find it though, so they instead took Nelson's life and attempted to burn down his house. Which, just seems like the most logical explanation to me. I don't know about you guys. But apparently Nelson's supposed copy of the book never turned up. Did he even have the book, or did it work in his favor all along? Only Nelson knows. Number 6. The Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire, nicknamed The Gospel of Satan, isn't really a book I want to read, and I think a lot of people wouldn't want to read it due to this either. This book is said to be written by a man possessed by the devil. The 16th century book is known as one of the most terrifying occult books in existence. It contains dark incantations and instructions on how to summon demons and raise spirits from the dead. Now, that last part may seem appealing to those who are grieving or suffering loss, but this book's dark reputation makes it one of the most fearful medieval manuscripts of all time. Even opening the book is considered equivalent to selling your soul to the devil. Thankfully, the Grand Grimoire is not available for purchase due to this, and I mean, who would want to buy that? It's said that the original copy is currently kept in the Vatican secret archives and not currently available to the public, and I think that's a good call. Number 5. The Book of Soiga, aka Aldrilia Sieve Soiga Vorkar. I hope I said that right. Now, knowledge has no enemy other than ignorance, says Jane Cupin, translator of the Book of Soiga. It's also known as the book that... So, there's that. It is a 16th century essay written in Latin about demonology. Only 2 material copies of the Book of Soiga are said to exist. One was rediscovered in the British Library in 1994, and the other was owned by the scholar John Dee, who devoted his entire life to decoding it. John was forewarned that anyone who deciphers the final 36 pages is fated to die within 2.5 years. Thankfully for John, he was never able to fully decipher its true meaning. Currently, John's book can be found at the Bodleian Library, Oxford, and there are now digital copies of this book freely available to download, which I suggest you don't do, no matter how curious you are. Number 4. The Book of Sacred Magic of Abrielin the Mage. Abrielin was a strange father, to say the least. Appropriate presents for children are toys, candy, not a book full of mythical curses. But that's exactly what he gave his son. Hey, even a normal book would have been fine, but a cursed one? No way. Since it was translated to English in the 1900s, this 15th century novel has had a reputation for being cursed. There are several theories why, but most believe it has to do with the mage's belief that everyone has their own unique personal demon. Yeah, Throughout this book, readers could learn rituals that bring their personal demons under control. They could learn to perform supernatural feats using sigils of magic words on a grid, but this book has a huge downside. It's believed that anyone with a copy in their possession will be haunted by spirits from another realm. They will also experience terrible luck that will ultimately bring about their demise. Now, paranormal enthusiasts know that it's risky to reach out and communicate with the spirit world, especially when it comes to demons, so it's not surprising that readers of this book have reported bad luck and hauntings by spirits from another realm. Number 3. The Codex Gigas. The Codex Gigas was published in the early 13th century and is written in Latin. The Codex Gigas is a Bible written in a monastery in Bohemia, modern-day Czech Republic. It's also referred to as the Devil's Bible due to a fully colored portrait of Satan taking up a whole page. And when I say a whole page, I mean a full 36-inch page. Yes, this is the largest illustrated medieval manuscript in the world, with a length of 36 inches, a width of 20 inches, and a total back-to-back thickness of almost 9 inches. Wow. The page next to the illustration contains a full description of the Kingdom of Heaven. Now, there are lots of stories about this book, most likely stemming from the large portrait of the devil. According to the legend, the Codex was written by Herman the Recluse, a monk who broke his monastic vow and was sentenced to be walled up alive. In order to try and escape his dire fate, he promised to write a book that would glorify the monastery forever, a book that contained the entire knowledge of the universe. Herman the Recluse was given one try to complete the book, and if he hadn't finished it by dawn, the sentence would be executed. Realizing by midnight that the task was impossible, Herman turned to the devil, who helped him finish the book for the price of his soul. Some say that Satan's portrait is his own signature, while others believe that Herman drew the portrait himself as a thanks. Number 2. Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a cursed grimoire of demonology. No one knows the author responsible for it. We don't even know when it was written, but best guesses point to it starting out as several separate texts that later came together in the 17th century. The book contains passages on how to conjure spirits of the dead and demons, and how to control these entities to do your bidding. Topics like how to become invisible and locate missing or stolen items are covered. Recipes for love potions and liquors of persuasion are also scattered throughout the book. For centuries, the book has been followed by rumors that it's cursed with a spell so dark, and anyone who has a copy of the book on their shelf will face certain doom. The curse doesn't specify what will happen if you own a copy, but I wouldn't risk it. Those who have owned it have reported strange occurrences like pages turning on their own and books violently flying across the room. Strange whispers and shadow creatures have also been reported by owners of the manual. I would not want a copy of this. And coming in at number 1, the Voyage Manuscript. If humans are afraid of one thing, it's the unknown, and that's why the Voyage Manuscript has become one of the most mysterious and feared books of all time. Written in the 15th century, there are 240 pages, but there's evidence that additional pages are missing. Some pages are foldable sheets of varying sizes, and most of the pages have fantastical illustrations or diagrams, some crudely colored with sections of the manuscript showing people, fictitious plants, and astrological symbols. This has frustrated and cursed people with bad luck for years. While countless historians and researchers, such as professional and amateur cryptographers, including American and British codebreakers from both World War I and World War II, have tried to crack the code, none have been successful. The manuscript has never been deciphered, and none of the many hypotheses proposed over the last 100 years have been independently verified. The mystery of its meaning and origin has excited the popular imagination, making it the subject of study and speculation. Was it written by people from another country, an unknown species, aliens? No one knows, but it's been long speculated that a fatal curse will be unleashed on anybody who finally unlocks this terrifying language.
At number 10, we have a warning from your son. There's something about a threat from a kid that makes it so much more terrifying. You know that they can't really hurt you, but in the same way, they scare the crap out of you because you just feel like they're going to get you. They know know the angles to come at you, and they can come get you when you're sleeping and you live in your home. Well, a mother went to lay down and enjoy her book one day, and she found a note from her little boy in her book, and she was very surprised. And it read, "Never put nature aside for television. You burned my feelings today, and I am warning you to never do what you did today again." Holy, this kid doesn't mess around. This is one strike and you're out. How do you put up with something like that just walking around your home? I mean, there is a good part left behind in this note. Never put nature aside for television. This kid is probably going to grow up to have a bright future in conservation right after he finishes turning his whole family into a series of fleshy dolls. At number 9, we have Knock. Horror shorts are an amazing way to give yourself a nice case of insomnia, but that is the juice horror fans show up for, and the Frederick Brown short story Knock does not pull any punches in this regard. It is about the last person stranded on the planet. That alone would fill your body with a bleak feeling of hopelessness, but then this book ups the ante with this line: "The last man on earth sat alone in a room. There was a knock at the door." Just piling on the problems for this poor sap. You can't just let him die alone in this horrible world. You have to include something mysterious to terrorize him. This is only a short story, so I'd say it's definitely worth the read, and if you wanted to get that reading challenge started late, this is a good way to sneak in one. Technically it's a story, so you're getting the whole thing in. That counts as one, I think. I don't know, maybe. At number 8, we have The Task. This article was written in Book Riot, and it covered the interesting world of college libraries and how people will often leave behind motivational letters in books. It's something that is really nice, a little booster to get you through your studying. You know that someone else has been in the same situation, and now you're going through that situation. Also, they are rooting for you, and they've made it through themselves. Even if the person is faceless, it still seems nice. Now, this story led to a note that was left in a book, but this note had instructions. It told the person reading it that they needed to write down the date which they found the note and then put it into another book. This seems harmless enough, but I decided to put a creepy spin on it. Why was this person asked to do this thing? Was this a simple experiment, or was the person who originally made the note watching, tracking each person who passed the note from book to book? What happens if they forego the instructions and don't bother to play along? Does another game start? These are just the creepy thoughts that are leaking out of my mind, but who knows, maybe I'm right. At number 7, we have Clive Barker's Book of Blood. With a title like that, it should be no surprise that it made it onto this list of creepy notes found in books. This is also a nice quote pulled out of the book. The extremely talented author left a little tidbit in there for us. Everyone is a book of blood. Wherever we're open, we're red. And of course, red is spelled R-E-D. What a nice little poem. It sounds like something Hannibal Lecter would say right before he starts to carve you up and put your organs into Ziploc freezer bags. At number 6, we have a note left in a Bible. This was from a Reddit thread started back in August of 2008. It was a guy who was staying in a hotel, and he had a question for the world of Reddit. He wanted to know what note he should leave behind in the Bible in his hotel room. Just a quick note, who knew that Reddit had been around since 2008? I wonder if it was more or less toxic back then. If you're a longtime Reddit user, let me know in the comments. Well, this thread wasn't very long, but the most popular comment was for him to leave behind a note which said this: "This is a work of fiction, do not take this seriously." Then there's a content advisory part of the sticker. It warns the reader that the book contains bestiality, incest, violence, sexual violence, use of drugs and alcohol, and then it goes on after that. It follows that with an exposure warning saying that it can cause children to have delusions and hallucinations. Now, the note itself is obviously just someone trying to get a reaction, but that's the part that I think could be scary. What if someone read this and they got extremely mad? They took it a little bit too seriously because they didn't like that someone was trying to defile the Bible, and then they freaked out, or maybe they tried to hurt someone, or maybe this just all ended as a fun joke. We will never know. At number 5, we have The Dollhouse Murders, a children's book. I just want to highlight that this is a kid's book, and that's why I put it on the list. There are so many notes that I could pull out of this book that I'm just going to kind of highlight the whole thing because of how creepy it is, so I'll just give you the rundown of what the book is about. A little girl moves into her grandparents' house, and there's a dollhouse in there. The dolls in the dollhouse start reenacting her grandparents' murder. Talk about traumatizing. Having your grandparents killed is bad enough, but then you have to relive it as these dolls act out every scenario, and then you find out that dolls can move on their own? No thank you. At number 4, we have The End of House of Leaves. If you haven't heard about the book House of Leaves, it's kind of a mind bender. It's about multiple perspectives, and it follows both the contents of a script that exists only inside the book and the life of the person reading that script, along with some other letters of people who seem to be slipping into insanity. The script within the book highlights a house that is impossibly big on the interior and has a hallway that opens up into a massive room that shifts and moves and changes and might be home to some sort of demonic beast or spirit. The house leads to the death of several people before evaporating like the end of Poltergeist. A Reddit user wrote about reading this book, but also that someone had left a note at the end of the book claiming that this was a real place and that they had gone there. Seeing that the book takes place in multiple realities, it's not a surprise that someone would take it one step further and put the book into our world. But what if it was real? What if this supernatural house exists somewhere in the world and this person did find it? At number 3, we have Rising Again. This is the last actual line I'm actually pulling from the book itself, something that the author wrote, and this is the perfect one to end off on. This is from the book Beloved by Toni Morrison, and it goes like this: people who die bad don't stay in the ground. Zombies, you gotta love them. Now, what does die bad mean? Does that have something to do with dying when you love someone or you have unfinished business? Or maybe it means that someone has been murdered. I haven't read this book, so I don't know exactly what the line is alluding to, but now I am curious enough that I will probably go pick it up. At number 2, we have A Love Note. A college girl from Kansas took a book from her school library, and there was something left inside it that sent a shiver down her spine. It might have been nothing, but it did make her feel really uneasy. It was a love note. Someone had gone out of their way to profess their love to a girl. She didn't think it was about her, but it was in the book. Basically, the letter said about how much they love this person, about how their body aches when they aren't around her, but then it went into details about how they watch her, about how they follow her. The most disturbing part was the note detailed a breakdown of what the girl looks like when she sleeps. It was then closed off with the initials SD. She turned it over to the librarian, and the school looked into it briefly, but there was no way they could tell who left the note or if it was actually real. It could have all just been a prank by some student to get someone freaked out, but then again, maybe it was real. And for our number 1 spot, we have A Note to Jesus. This note might have saved someone's life, but the context is quite frightening. In October of 2013, a note was found in the Bible of an 8-year-old girl. This was a note to Jesus, and it was about how someone had been abusing her for the past 6 years. Eric Riviera was 37 at the time, and he'd been taking advantage of this poor girl. When the note was found, it was quickly turned over to the police, who performed a raid on Riviera's house and found that the girl's description of Riviera's house in the notes was exactly right. He was quickly arrested, and not long after he was arrested, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 25 years in prison.